So what I wanted to speak about today relates to Tisha B'Av, and it relates to some messages that we can take personally from the fast day, from what got us into Galut, what got us into exile, and what Be'ezrat Hashem can get us out. I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to be in a city in Europe. And I'm not going to name the city because I don't want, for Lashon Hara, I don't want to say the name of the city. But this city in Europe had a Jewish community for centuries. It's one of the unique, rare Jewish communities, places that have had a consistent Jewish community for centuries. And I was in this city with a group of Emet students, and a person was taking us on a tour of the city. And in the middle of the tour, they were showing us a beautiful synagogue. And then they showed us another synagogue. And they told us that after the Spanish Inquisition in 1492, Jews from Spain came to this city. And unfortunately, there were many Jews of high political levels in this city who were not comfortable with these other Jews coming to them. And they went to the government of this city, of this country, and they said, how much do we need to pay you to not accept these Jews? And thank God, the government of this country turned to these Jews and said, you want to pay that your brothers shouldn't be able to come here? You will pay and they will come. And they paid and they still came. And I was sitting in a Sephardic shul that dates back almost to the time of the Inquisition, about over 400 years ago. We know that one of the main reasons we are in Galut today is because of Sinat Chinam, because of baseless hatred. Jews not caring about each other. But where does this come from? What I'm going to share with you in the next few minutes is based on a beautiful sefer named the Sfas Emes, and with a particular explanation of this that I learned from my father. So I just want to share with you some ideas that I think will make this Tisha B'Av more meaningful. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that says, Im ein ani li mili, im ani la'atzmi ma'ani. If I am not for myself, who is for me? But if all I am is for myself, what am I? And then the Mishnah ends off, Im lo achshav emasai. If not now, then when? Now, this Mishnah is one of my favorite Mishnayot in the entire Mishnayos. And I believe this Mishnah is teaching us something extremely powerful. And the idea that this Mishnah is teaching us is a person must take care of themselves. Im ein ani li mili. A person has to have a healthy sense of self. One of the most important things that I teach at Emet from my social work background and my rabbinic background is the importance of taking care of yourself, of having a healthy sense of self. But im ani la'atzmi ma'ani. If all I am is for myself, if all I am is self-centered and just caring about myself, what am I? I'm just an empty shell. And we know that so much of Torah is about balance. It's about finding a balance. And ultimately, this to me is one of the greatest balancing acts that we as a human being has to do. Find the balance between the self and the other. We need to have a healthy sense of self to take care of the other. But if all I am is myself, then there is nothing. There's nothing there. The greatest sense of self is when I take care of somebody else. And then the Mishnah ends off, Im lo achshav emasai. And until a few months ago, I did not understand why Hillel sticks that last line in. If not now, then when? It just seems like some good advice. What's the connection? And I think the explanation is because, like Reb Nachman of Breslov said, the world is a narrow bridge. But ultimately, you have to make the next step. Like we know if somebody's walking on a tightrope, How do you make it across a tightrope? You go like this, right? You one hand this way, one hand this way. You find balance. But you also have to move forward. If you don't keep moving forward, you're going to fall. So to me, this is a very, very powerful idea. The self and the other. But where is this all about? Where does this all come from? We know that in Eicha, we read that Yerushalayim is a city, Ir Shechuvra La Yachtav, a city of connectivity, a city of connection. Those of you who have the opportunity to go to the Kotel, you stand at the Kotel and you feel a connection. We talk about the Beit HaMikdash. What was so special about the Beit HaMikdash? They're doing ritual sacrifices. What's so important? What's so important about the Beit HaMikdash? So the way our rabbis teach us is that when we had the Beit HaMikdash, we were connected. We were like a plug that's plugged into a wall. We were connected to the source. We were connected to Hashem. And when we have that connection, it's an entirely different story. People ask today, why are we mourning the loss of the Beit HaMikdash, the loss of the land of Israel, of Zion? We have Israel. We have the country of Israel. We even have the Kotel. But yet we're lacking a tremendous amount of connectivity, of connection. My father shares a beautiful story that he heard from Reb Shlomo Freifeld. Reb Shlomo Freifeld was his Rebbe. My second son was named after him. He's the one who founded Yeshiva Shar Yoshev in Far Rockaway. And he used to give a shiur once a month on the Sfas Emes, on this book. And he was given to recently married men. And I remember growing up, my father sharing the story with me so many times, because it had a very big impact on him, because he learned in that yeshiva right after he got married. And the following story, Rabbi Freifeld shared that a young man who just recently got married came to him and was listening to the shiur and the Sfas Emes talking about all these spiritual concepts. And the guy goes home Friday night, and his wife tells him, as they're sitting down to eat, she says, I was tired today, I did not make chicken soup. And chicken soup was something he looked forward to the whole week, for chicken soup. And that was like Shabbat was chicken soup. And at that moment, he went into himself and he realized how much his wife was doing. And he appreciated her in a different level. And he said, chicken soup is chicken soup. But there's something much deeper here. And he not only did he not let it bother him, but that anger that started building up inside of him turned into love. And he came to Rabbi Freifeld the next week and he said that at that moment, he felt like he connected to something that was much deeper than himself. We know that the sins of Sinat Chinam really has its roots in the sin of Yosef and his brothers, when Yosef was sold by his brothers. So we need to talk a little bit about what took place at that time when Yosef was sold by his brothers. The Sfas Emes goes and explains it from a very deep level, an understanding of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and each one their individual roles. We know that Avram was the character trait of chesed, of kindness, of just giving. We know that Yitzchak was the character trait of gevura, of order and rules. And Yaakov was the harmony between these two. In many ways, the beginning of Yaakov's life, the first half of his life, he was doing kiruv. He was living in the house of Lavan. He was a harmony between all these different things together. Yosef and his brothers had a machloket, had a difference of agreement. Yosef was still sort of living in the time of the Avot, his perspective, his prophecies, and the rest of the Shvatim believed that that time for prophecies is over and this is a due time now. And they had a disagreement. But ultimately that disagreement led to Yosef's brothers trying to kill him. How do brothers kill a brother? How is that possible? And what I would like to suggest, based on this idea, is that that's only possible when we don't feel connected, when we don't realize that we are all connected and that we are connected to a source, we're connected to Hashem. When we're lacking that connectivity, when we're lacking that connection, then what happens? We focus on the differences. And we become very restricted, like Esav. We become very, very restrictive. When a person lives with this kind of restriction, anyone who's not like me, anyone who's different from me, I look at as something else. And I cannot feel connected, I cannot feel one with each other. Rabbi Freifeld pointed out that if we want to end Sinat Chinam, how do we end Sinat Chinam? What's the tikkun for Sinat Chinam? What's the fix for Sinat Chinam? So we know the answer is Ahavat Chinam. But in essence, what's the greatest Ahavat Chinam? When I am willing to give up myself for you. When I am willing to literally put myself on the line and give up myself because that's how much I value you. Now, ironically, like I said before, that's only possible when it starts off when you have a healthy sense of self. And then you can let go of yourself. But ultimately, when your person is able to be moser nefesh and give themselves up for another person, that's the ultimate tikkun for Sinat Chinam. And we know what happened. Yehuda came. Before Yosef revealed his identity, Yehuda came and said, I'm willing to give up myself for my brother, for Binyamin. I'll die for him. And that was the beginning of the tikkun for the Mechirat Yosef, for the selling of Yosef. Because if I am willing to give up myself for you, then I am tapped into and connected to what makes us all connected and makes us all one. When Klal Yisrael realizes, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, we're all responsible one for another. The word Arev, what does the word Arev mean? In Hebrew, if you need a cosigner on a loan, you ask for Arev. We are all cosigners. We are all cosigners for each other. We're all connected and responsible one for another. Unfortunately, we live in a world where we focus very, very much on the differences. And the way I would like to explain this is that the reason why, like think about Sinat Chinam. Is Sinat Chinam the cause or the effect of the Galut? In essence, if you think about it, Sinat Chinam is the effect. Because of the fact that we felt so disconnected, we looked at each other as separate beings, as separate people. We looked critically and negatively at each other. This was, in essence, a symptom of the problem that caused the Galut. How can we in our life fix this problem? It seems like such a big problem. How do we fix this problem? And the reality is, we know Chazal teach us, our rabbis teach us, and this goes back to the Gemara 400 years after the Churban. The Gemara asked the famous question. The Gemara says, why are we in Galut longer for the sin of Sinat Chinam, which doesn't seem to be as big as the sin of adultery, idol worship, murder of the first Beis HaMikdash. And 400 years after the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, the Gemara answers, you're right. It's not as bad. But they knew they were doing something wrong, and we don't know we're doing anything wrong. And unfortunately, we can still say this today. And the question of the Gemara almost 2,000 years later is even a stronger question. How are we still in exile today? And I think the understanding is because at some level, we're still not feeling that sense of connection. We're still not feeling that sense of achrayot, of responsibility one for another. We're still living with this restrictedness of it has to be my way. and I can't respect other people who have different approaches and different perspective. Anti-Semitism, Esav, the Nazis were about extreme restrictiveness. There is no soul. It's just order. It's just rules. I was reading an article recently, and I hope it doesn't bother you if you drive a Ford car, but Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford company, was actually personally very responsible for the Holocaust. Do you know that? Henry Ford, in the early 1920s, became a pretty rabid anti-Semite. And he became very paranoid. And he built up all these ideas in his head that the Jews, the international Jew, was responsible for all the problems in the world. And he had a lot of money. And he had his own magazine in Detroit. I believe it was called the Detroit Independent. That was his magazine, not so independent. And he fed stories to this magazine. And somebody brought him a copy of a book called The Elders of Zion. And this was a book that was actually written by people from the Tsar's government in Russia in the early 1900s, a propaganda book, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, how there's this secret group of Jews that plan all these things against the world and try to overtake the world. It was total propaganda. But this man, who was supposed to be an intelligent man, the head of the Ford company, who created the first real production plant, somebody brings him this book, and because of his anti-Semitism, he didn't even question if this is a true book or not a true book, if there's any truth to this at all. He bought it hook, line, and sinker, and he took this book and he translated it into 16 languages, and it was distributed all around Europe. And the Nazis, a lot of their initial ideas and excitement to destroy the Jews the way they tried to destroy us began with this book. And then as the article goes, Henry Ford realized this book was a fake, and he apologized. But it didn't do much, because the book was already translated into 16 languages. Now, I'm not standing here today to bash Henry Ford. We could do that a different day. But the point is, in this extreme sense, this man's restrictiveness, for whatever reason he became that way, ended up being partial cause to the slaughter of millions of Jews. We all need to look into ourselves and ask ourselves the question, where are we restrictive and where are we open? What areas of our life can we be more connected? In what areas of our life can we care more about another? You know, the next speaker who's going to speak now is Rabbi Ben Zion Klatzko. And if I think of a Jew who cares more about other Jews that he never met before, I don't know if there's a Jew more than Rabbi Klatzko who fits that description. A Shabbos table that's 24 feet long that splits up into 4 tables, and however many guests he has at his Shabbos table, through his Shabbat.com, he's hosting thousands of others all around the world. I had the opportunity recently to meet with a philanthropist, a wealthy Jewish person. And this person, in my opinion, together with a few others, are probably the greatest people in the world in their sense of connectivity, of seeing all Jews as part of one, and caring about all Jews the same way he cares about his next door neighbor. How do we become that kind of Jew? How do we become that kind of person? And what I would suggest is, and I think this is Rabbi Freifeld's perspective, is try to look at every person as if they're your brother. If there's Jews that dress different than you, that live in Borough Park, or Jews that dress different than you that live in the Five Towns, or Jews that dress different than you that live in Mexico or Israel, whoever it is around the world. Try to think about, that's my brother. I have a brother who wears a kippah sruga. I do. I have a brother with a shtreimel. I have a brother maybe who's not religious. Each person should think, that's my brother. And if that's my brother, then I treat them differently than I would treat somebody who I just want to say, oh, that's not my type. They're different from me. And if we can have this perspective, because if we think about what was the ultimate sin of Yosef being sold by his brothers stopped seeing each other as brothers. The tikkun for that is for all of us to see each other as brothers. I just had the opportunity to be in Israel for a few weeks. And when you see Israelis protecting each other, a person who stands guard at the front of a mall, and he could be Chiloni, Haredi, who knows what he is. But he's there to protect everyone that's from inside. Or someone protecting a yeshuv. That, if you think about it, is really the ultimate Avat Yisrael, the ultimate love for every Jew. And somebody who prays for every Jew. I'm not going to go into the story in depth, but there was a fascinating story where there was a soldier who was captured in East Jerusalem, Nachshon Waxman, and the entire Jewish community came to pray for this one person. It made such a big impact, it made it to the front page of the New York Times. And according to many spiritual people, we got as close to the Mashiach coming at that point that we ever got to in our recent times. Let's care about each other. Let's connect to each other. Let's realize that this connection comes when we appreciate how special we are. The Torah tells us, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." Love your neighbor like you love yourself. Appreciate how special you are. And then it's easy to appreciate others. Care about each other. Feel that sense of connection. And Bezrat Hashem will be able to get the Beit HaMikdash back very speedily in our days. Thank you.